Hello everybody. Just to continue our conversation, what about design? What is it about design that contribute to our world at the moment, or that it can contribute into the future? Well, design is very much a contested domain. What is it for? Who is it for? What improvement can design achieve? And first of all, what is design? What do I mean by design? And what role does technology have in design? Modern design has evolved alongside our consumer culture as both its servant and its fellow traveller. So the earliest designers were there to make goods more attractive, more useful to their intended market. And this is both its strength and its weakness, because as consumer society developed, as industrialism developed, the environment was seen as a bank of resources which could be drawn down by industry more or less without end, without a limit. And design was seen initially as industry's servant, translating the needs of the producer to the consumer and vice versa. So the ideology of industrialism, you could say, its philosophy was utilitarian or instrumental. Nature was to be exploited for profit. People were to be used as instruments to gain that profit, both as producers and consumers. And design was, as it were, a cultural intermediary. That's Bourdieu's words. For Morris and Ruskin, however, amongst the first great theorists of design in England during the Industrial Revolution, the factory system was cruel and basically environmentally destructive, replacing quality goods with shoddy ones that were machine-made. And the machine replaced good work and destroyed all satisfaction in work, leading to unemployment, crime, and poverty. Needless to say, Morris was a leading socialist, one of the founders of socialism in Britain and Europe. His view was that socialism was actually all about the education of people into and through design, and this is quite stunning to those who aren't familiar with this story. So for him, design was transforming materials into goods that were useful and beautiful. And he wanted us to look to nature and to human skill and ingenuity to create objects of beauty and obviously also of longevity. So he was one of the first to talk about the connection between design and the ideal, what we really wanted out of life in the modern age. So for him, his ideals can be summarized under four heads. Design, first of all, has the power and the ability to transform the world for the better, and it's fundamentally independent. It can create joy and beauty and utility for all. Secondly, all design was equal. There was no such thing for him as a hierarchy of creative arts. Painting, architecture was to him no superior than, say, making things with leather, which was offensive at the time. Thirdly, good work, that is hand-based largely, but with the machine assisting, could transform both the maker and the person who bought and used the product. And this ideal of good work really inspired a lot of him and his followers. And then he had this very interesting concept, which has been missed by a lot of people who write about him, this notion of stewardship in possession, that consumption should be based on real needs, not on whims, not on fashion. And that, so in a way, he idealized the work of design as bringing lasting joy, lasting satisfaction to the user, which goes directly against, if you like, the ideology of consumerism, of chasing the new to perfect the self as an evolving project to go better and better towards something, the good life. So in modernism, his ideas were taken up, but the machine was regarded as a friend of man, friend of people, and design was seen as being able to transform materials through science and technology to the betterment of human beings. And it became immensely influential and was often paired with democracy in the West and socialism in the East. Machines were no longer seen as evil. The car and the aeroplane became symbols of modernity and of democracy and socialism. So sustainable design, in a way, appeared as a kind of reaction to this, again influenced by earlier ideas from Morris. Was driven by this ideal of self-transformation through new visions of the possibility of living in harmony with nature. And you can see this, for example, in the counterculture in the 60s. Alternative startups from the 60s, Apple, and 70s, Apple, Lonely Planet, Patagonia, etc. They used this same promise of consumption as a tool for transformation, designed for a kind of a consumption that could transform and uplift the individual and save the earth was seen as a possibility. So there was a kind of a rejection of the idea that we could unqualified use the machine for good. The machine was often seen as something that was misused. And so there was a discourse of alternative consumption, alternative technology, and of the designer as something of a hero that could provide transformative technologies, transformative products, transformative environments that would change the user into somebody that could live in harmony with nature. If you want to see what I mean, go and have a look at The Garbage Warrior by Mike Reynolds, or starring Mike Reynolds. In a way, the problem with this was that it continued the idealism of consumerism, because the ideal was that design could transform the individual, and the individual, by making the right choices, could in a way transform the world. And this, of course, leaves aside the poor, the uneducated, or those who aren't interested, to just get on with their own lives. And it also leaves the corporations responsible for a lot of the problems in our world off the hook. They can basically carry on without any kind of limits to their behavior. Whereas I think increasingly design, sustainable design, has evolved to seeing that actually the best approach is co-creation, that is co-design, that is using the end user, seeing design in relational terms as benefiting the end user, the environment, regenerating even the environment, transforming those who come into contact with it. So instead of the designer focusing on producing a product or an environment, the designer is in a way influencing a system, influencing through technology, a background system perhaps, but also transforming the experience of the user, and that being really, really important. So what we need to do in a way when we think about design is to see it in terms of the user, the designer, the producer, the environment, and the technology and materials all coming together in a relationship where the goal is to transform the experience and also transform the result, so that the result does not damage the environment and doesn't damage other people. At the moment, unfortunately, there are barriers to this, and I'll be talking a little bit about these barriers in the next little part.